So in the previous two videos we installed Active Directory, and so now let's go take a look at what happened to our Windows Server 2008 box as a result of having installed Active Directory and told it to create a forest and our first domain in that forest. So now when I click on Start, a couple of things that I want to show you here. If I go to Administrative Tools, you will now see some of the management consoles, which we will talk about in a different video and dig into a little bit. But you can see domains and trusts, sites and services, users and computers. And so we now have installed these Active Directory objects on this computer, and we can start to manipulate them now. Let's go into Active Directory users and computers. Now we're going to come back to this and revisit it in a different video, but I just kind of want to get you going here. First of all, you'll notice in this management console that here is our domain. If you remember, we set up VTC class, and if I expand that, you will notice there's the users that it created for us, and we can right click on a user and go to properties, and that's a user object that's out there. There's the administrator for Active Directory, and there's all these tabs and information. We'll dig into those a little later. We'll also go into built-in here, and we can see some groups. Notice these are some groups. Notice the server operators group, and if I right click and go to properties, I can see members of this group, the groups that it's a member of, and so forth. So there's more objects that were added to Active Directory. Let's come out of here. Well, here's our domain controllers group, and if you look in there, that's the name of our computer, and I meant to change it from my install to something more friendly, and I didn't do it. We can do it later. But this one is currently the name of my server is Win Y4LH V30W4Y4. Very easy to remember, right? Let's close this and let's go take a look at, under Administrative Tools, Sites and Services, and you will see that the sites that we have, since we didn't create one, here's our default first site that was mentioned out there, and here's our server that's in that site, and we can see some settings and so forth that are in there. We won't get into all that right now. And then one last thing let's talk about, since we're talking about these Active Directory objects, our domains and trusts. And we can see the domains that are out there. There's our VTC class domain. That's the only domain we have. And so that's really all that we can see. I do want to point out one other tool that got installed. We will come back to this later, ADSI Edit. This is, notice, a low-level editor for Active Directory domain services and lightweight domain services. Notice that we can right-click here and say Connect To, and then we can connect to our particular VTC class and our default domain, the one that I'm already logged into, and then we will connect into that, and we can start to work with with Active Directory here, and we can do some cool things. We will come back to this and see it later. But those are the objects that were set up and some things that we can begin to work with in Active Directory, and we will dig into each one of those. Notice it also set up a group policy management console, and if you remember, it set up DNS for us. And so again, we will come back in here a little bit later, but if we look in our forward lookup zones and we look in the VTC class, you will see some of our host records here. Here's the host record for our server. Notice our IP address is 10.0.2.15. That's a host record. That's what happened as a result of loading Active Directory. And again, those objects are out there, the user objects, the group objects, the domain objects. They're already out there, and if you can remember back to some of those earlier videos, the triangles and the little squares and so forth. And now we can actually go out there and set up OUs and stuff. You'll see that in other videos. I just wanted you to see what happened in the Active Directory objects that exist now as a result of loading Active Directory and adding that domain services role to this computer.